Is House Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene eyeing a seat in the Senate? Possibly.
You may run against the Georgia governor, Brian Kemp. What do you think about his chances as a Senate candidate?
We will see who runs. It may be the governor. President Trump has said that he would back Marjorie Taylor Greene to run for United States Senate. I don't think that she's got the guts to do it, but she would be a disaster in the United States Senate.
What about Kemp?
Well, I'll be ready for any opponent.
Before announcing her bid for Senator Jon Ossoff's seat in the 2026 race, she is reportedly waiting to see whether or not Georgia Governor Brian Kemp will throw his hat in the ring, because he is the only person who she thinks she cannot beat.
I'm Brian Kemp. If you want a politically incorrect conservative, that's me.
While Greene has maintained a very public profile during her time in Congress, the district she represents in Georgia is very, very red, so it's not necessarily representative of the rest of the state. That said, her very public profile might help her to win some campaign donations, and if she can secure an endorsement from Trump, that wouldn't hurt. He's already said that he's willing to quote-unquote fight like hell to help her defeat Ossoff if it comes to that. Greene believes that she can win the Republican primary in Georgia, again, as long as Kemp is not in the race. And if she can do that, there is a decent chance that whoever the Republican candidate is who's running against Ossoff can win the whole thing. Georgia is a tricky state. It's a state that currently has a Republican governor and 2 Democratic senators. Additionally, Trump won the state in 2024, even though he famously lost the state in 2020. When Ossoff won his seat in 2020, it was a very hard-won victory. He was up against an incumbent senator, David Perdue. Even though Perdue had only served 1 term at the time, it's incredibly difficult to unseat an incumbent. Perdue actually defeated Ossoff in the general election, but not by a large enough margin, so the race went to a runoff, and Ossoff won the runoff. Not that it's relevant, but Perdue then made a bid for governor, but he was soundly defeated in the primary by Kemp. I don't know what he's up to these days, but it's not out of the question that he might try to get his Senate seat back. Either way, Greene doesn't seem that worried about him, just Kemp. So now we have a Democratic senator up for re-election in a state that Trump won in the most recent election. When Ossoff was elected in 2020, Biden had very narrowly won the state, flipping it blue for the first time since Clinton in 1992. And let's not forget all of the drama surrounding the 2020 election, specifically all of the drama over the Georgia election results. Trump managed to flip Georgia back to red in 2024, but Georgia sits on a very fine line teetering between the two parties. Even before MTG started floating the idea of a run, this was already going to be a very tough midterm race and one to watch for the whole country. According to polling cited by right-wing sources, Kemp is most likely to defeat Ossoff in a Senate race, flipping the Senate seat back from blue to red. Kemp is expected to announce whether or not he'll be running by the end of next month, and if he decides to do so, Greene said that she might consider running for Kemp's then vacant governor's seat instead. Meanwhile, in Texas, State Attorney General Ken Paxton, who is the most legally embroiled attorney general in the country, keeps finding ways to avoid any kind of consequences for his actions, or rather his crimes. And the way he's mostly been able to do that was first by being the top law enforcement agent in the state, and second by being the attorney general in a state that has a nearly entirely red state legislature with plenty of high-ranking officials willing to look the other way for him. But empowered by his own ability to slip through cracks, Paxton has announced that he too will be making a bid for the U.S. Senate.
Attorney General, you have a big announcement, I understand, you want to make tonight. What is it?
Well, first of all, I'm excited to be on your show to do this. It's a great place to do it. I'm announcing that I'm running for U.S. Senate against John Cornyn, who apparently is running again for his 5th term, which would put him there 3 decades. It's definitely time for a change in Texas. We have another great U.S. Senator, Ted Cruz, and it's time we have another great senator that will actually stand up and fight for Republican values, fight for the values of the people of Texas, and also support Donald Trump, in the areas that he's focused on in a very significant way. And that's what I plan on doing.
Texas is a little different than Georgia, though. Here we've got all red. We have a red governor, we have 2 red senators, and the state went to Trump in 2024 and in 2020. So there's not much of an opening for Paxton, it would seem. Well, Republican Senator John Cornyn is up for re-election in 2026, and Ken Paxton is ready to primary him. His main reason for doing so, apart from personal enrichment and empowerment, is that Cornyn isn't quite MAGA enough for Paxton's liking. No one has ever accused Cornyn of being too liberal, but of our two senators, he's certainly less vocal in his support of Trump and the administration. Of course, he's less vocal compared to Ted Cruz, the other Texas senator who spends most of his time these days podcasting rather than legislating. Not that that's necessarily a bad thing. But Paxton told Laura Ingraham on her show earlier this month that, quote, "It's definitely time for a change in Texas." And in a social media post, he said he would fight for President Trump's agenda and take a sledgehammer to the DC establishment. When this story first broke earlier this month, I paid attention to it because I live in Texas, but I never know how relevant these stories are to people outside of Texas. However, with this one, Paxton, first of all, is a national disaster. I feel like people know about him. He literally set a dumpster on fire once to evade accountability. He is a character, to say the least. But his specific rhetoric about how Cornyn isn't Trumpy enough and about how he's going to go to Washington to support Trump and bust up the establishment, it's all starting to feel a little bit dated, and maybe I'm being a little optimistic here, but bear with me. For starters, unless something crazy happens, Trump is going to be out of office before Paxton is, if Paxton actually makes it to the Senate. However, I wonder if Paxton's primary of Cornyn's seat could be seen as a barometer of how the rest of the country is feeling. Texas is known to be a deeply red, entrenched state, but there are still plenty of Democrats living here. Texas suffers from red sprawl with concentrated blue dots thrown in. But even amongst the red sprawl, not everyone is as MAGA as the media might have you think. There are plenty of Republican voters here who prefer, say, a Cornyn to a Cruz. Cornyn is, in many ways, representative of more traditional Republicans, a conservative who doesn't necessarily get caught up in political infighting and mudslinging and the idolatry of Trump. His political stances aside, for the most part, he kind of just puts his head down and gets to work. Compare that to Ted Cruz, who is constantly in the headlines for things he's saying and doing, so much of which is just ridiculous. He's calmed down a little bit lately, thankfully, but Ken Paxton is arguably even more ridiculous, more egregious, and more shameless than Ted Cruz. If Cornyn is able to defeat Paxton in the primary and secure the Texas nomination for Senate, then it could possibly, optimistically, be an indicator that Republican voters are tired of all of the Trumpism and the MAGA extremism and ready for something a little bit more sane. Here's hoping, all right? That's it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks.